Okay, so onwards. We've made our doll's head, so she's looking all lovely and stuffed. It's now time for us to choose our skin colour. So I do 6 different colours of the doll jersey. I do peach, fair, sun-kissed, olive, russet and brown. And this is from the DeWitt Ingle range, which is quite a superior range of doll jersey. And these are the colours, so you can see them all together. So this is the peach, fair, sun-kissed, olive, russet and brown. So quite a broad spectrum of colours there. Something for everyone, I feel. So sun-kissed is by far the most popular shade that I do. I would say 75% of people like this colour. Now you might think, oh, it looks a bit dark, but rest assured, when it's on, it's quite stretchy, so it does actually reduce the colour a little bit. So you know, don't be sort of put off by, oh god, this looks too dark. When it's actually on the doll, you'll be surprised at how it does lighten down. So sun-kissed is the colour that we're going to use for our Polly Dolly. Okay, so we're going to start with the head, and here's the head back pattern piece. And like I said in the introduction, it's really important to cut these out onto card or something sturdy, because it's so much easier to actually draw around them rather than on flimsy paper. So cut the pattern piece out on my marked line. Don't add on any seam allowance at this point. Okay, so we have our pattern cut out. And we're placing it onto our fabric, and we're using the air erasable marker pen. So just make sure that you've got your little seam allowance to the side, and then just start drawing around your pattern piece. Now, just to clarify about the use of these air erasable marker pens, they're absolutely magnificent to use. However, I would advise you only tracing around your pattern piece on the day that you intend to sew it, because they've only got about a 24-hour lifespan. That means that if you was to draw around your pattern piece on one day and then go back the next day to sew it, you'll find that the pattern lines that you've drawn around have probably disappeared. So no, that's happened to me quite a few times before, in the past I should say. So only use these air erasable marker pens the day you intend to sew. So yeah, so pattern piece is drawn round completely. And then next job is to cut it out using a very small seam allowance. Preferably with a pair of scissors that are sharp. The seam allowance I use is approximately the width of a sewing machine foot, so it doesn't need to be a big allowance, just a tiny little seam allowance. Okay, so we have our 2 pattern pieces cut ready. We've got the back of the head and the bigger piece, the front of the head. So next thing we need to do is align our pattern pieces together, right sides facing. So just put the pattern piece on top of each other, and then when you pin through the actual drawn line. So each pin is going through the drawn line. And then when you turn it over, you'll be able to see that it's through the drawn line on the other side. So this means that the pattern is going to be consistent, and it won't be misshapen, either too big or too small. So all the way down, just check that your pins are through the actual drawn line. Yes, it is. And yes, it is. Okay, so you would now be ready to sew. When you do stitch your fabrics, do try to choose a fabric, a thread, sorry, that is, a matching colour to your skin tone. So here it is sewn together, and as you can see, I'm very close to that drawn line. I do tend to bring it in probably a millimetre or so, but that's just my preference. Both sides together, front and back of the head. So we're now going to neaten that seam allowance. So by using pinking shears, I'm just going to trim away the excess of the seam allowance. Next, you're going to turn the headpiece right side out, and then we need to get those seams nice and flat. So what we'll use for this is a dotting tool. Now this little instrument, this is widely used in the nail art industry, but it's great to use to help you press your seams out in between your finger and thumb. So place it in under the seam. And then with that little ball that you've got on the end, you just need to run that nice and firmly through that sewn seam line. And what this will do, this will push the fabric out so that you get a nice flat seam. I do this on all my seams, all my doll skin and all my outfits. It's the easiest way to get a really nice pinched out seam that's not all sort of puckering inwards. And back around the other side. And there you have your head fabric ready to put onto your dolly. So now it's time to fit the doll fabric onto the doll's head. So as you can see, you've got a narrower back piece and a wider front piece. Now that narrow back piece obviously goes on the back part of the head. So roll the fabric up like you would a sock. And then just push it over the neck edge of the doll. Sorry, I'm having to do this slightly away from the camera line, only I tend to push this against my body as I'm pulling on the doll fabric. So onto the neck, and then you just need to start rolling up the neck edge as far up as you can get it. Push it around, and then you start pulling up on the doll fabric to cover. Firstly, I do the back of the head, turn it round and do a little bit on one side, a little bit over the front, and just keep gradually pulling small amounts. It's a tight fit, but it will get there. Careful of your nose. push your hands down inside and pull up, holding firmly onto the neck edge. Keep pulling, it will go. Keep checking that you've got that back seam towards the back end of the head. The easiest way for pulling it up is to get your fingers down inside the fabric and pull it up that way. So just have a quick check that you've got enough at the top for folding over. And then on the bottom of the neck edge, just start pulling it down and smoothing it through. Yeah, that's good, there's enough at the top there. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is I've got a piece of string, it's about 25 centimetres, and I'm just going to tie that around her neck edge. It hasn't got to be tight or anything, it's just sort of there to stop the head fabric from puckering up as you're continuing to work on it. So yeah, that'll keep that nicely in place. You can just snip those ends off. And then just make sure that it's gone up under her neckline and that you're smoothing any wrinkles out. And then you can take some sewing thread. This can just be your normal standard sewing thread, or you might want to use a strong thread. Just on that neck edge there. And you can just run a running stitch all the way around just to keep that in place and stop it from flapping up. So there you have your head fabric on. Nicely shaped around the neck. Good eye line. Yeah, so there she is. Right, moving on now to the body, front and back. So with the front body, you've got that curved edge. You just need to make some small snips along that curved edge. I do about 6 snips, 3 each side of the centre dot. And then with right sides facing, line your two pieces up and start to pin. Just ensuring that your pin goes through the drawn line. And that it's matching the drawn line on the other side. And just work your way down the side of the body, pinning as you go. And again, give it a quick check to make sure it's lined up. I can see my bottom pin is not quite lined up, so I need to move that just to make sure that it is in alignment with the drawn line on the back. It's worth taking time here just to make sure that the lines are matching. No, still not quite right. Let's try again. Yeah, perfect that time. So yeah, trial and error, just keep going until you get it right. It's worth spending that little bit of extra time knowing that it's perfect. Then you're going to sew down that side and the other side. Okay, so we've sewn down our sides. We've got our little snips on our neck edge. The next thing to do is the little corner edge where the shoulder meets the neck. Just do a little snip in there, up to the stitch, but not through the stitch, otherwise you'll have to re-sew. So just a little snip in there, just so that when that's turned out, it's going to lay flat. And then take your pinking shears and just snip away at the excess seam allowance on both sides. Okay, so grab your dotting tool again, turn your body parts right side out, and then just using your dotting tool, run that along all the seams. Through the neck there, into the shoulder. Make sure you really get that shoulder point out as far as you can go. Obviously without poking it through the fabric, and then running it down the side seam. And do this on both sides. So there's our body with its seams nicely pressed out. It does look a bit skinny at this point, but it does get wider as you stuff. Now the back edges, I've put a little pen mark where the centre points are. This is just a little guide for when you're attaching the legs. So we're going to start pinning up just a seam allowance on the inside. But before you do that, just get your scissors and just make a little snip, just a small snip just on the inside of each seam. That just helps when you're stretching that seam allowance out on the curve. It's just going to help to make it fit a bit better. So start turning up, placing some pins in. You're going to do this all the way around the bottom edge of the body. Then just open up that seam on both sides, and as you fold it over you can give it a little stretch so that that little snip that you did will just help to ease the fabric round. Then take some tacking thread in a different colour. I've just used a dark brown here, and we're just going to run a tacking stitch all the way along that bottom edge. So there you have your tacking stitch all the way around the lower edge of your body. Okay, so I've also tacked along the top edge of the neck to keep that down in place. But don't do it too tight, you do need to have a little bit of stretch there because obviously you've got to get that slid over the neck on the doll's head. So turn your body right side out, and then you need to slide the neck on the doll's head into the neck of the body. Not an easy task when you're trying to do it on camera and keep it in the middle of you. I need to push it against my body. So slide it on gradually. Oh, and she's back in the room. Okay, give it a little tweak around to get it to lay flat. Put it on top of the string. And then make sure that it's really sitting nicely under that neck edge, under the chin. And is it even? Just check that it's looking, you know, like a shoulder should sit on a neck. Is it evenly positioned? You can feel where the ears are at the side, because that's where your cross stitches were. So you need to make sure that your shoulders are sort of in, you know, parallel with that. And then when you're happy with the positioning of the body onto the head, you can start pinning all the way around. So just stab a pin all the way through the body, small little gaps, and just position the pins all the way around the neck edge to keep it in place. Just check her again, make sure that you're still happy that it's sitting right, that the shoulders are in alignment with the side of the ears, where the ears will be. Right, okay, now we're going to sew it on. So you can either use the strong thread or you can just use your normal sew all Gutermann thread. In that case, that's what I'm using. I do tend to go around twice so that I know that she's really sewn on securely. So to start your stitch, I stitch into the back of the head. And then I'll bring that thread, after I've snipped the ends, I'll bring that thread down through to the neck edge. Because there's nothing worse than seeing a lumpy sort of starting couple of stitches, so at least you know your starting stitches will be inside the hairline. And you're just going to work all the way around that neck edge. So you go in through the fabric, through the fold, back on the other piece of fabric, along in a straight line, bring it out through the fold, I do go in quite deep with the stitch, and like I said, it doesn't matter how far apart the stitches are because you are going to go around at least twice. Okay, so her head is sewn to her body, and now all we need to do is just close the gap at the top. You might notice a little bit of bagginess at the side there, so what you do is you put your fingers in and you pull up as hard as you can and just secure with a couple of pins at the top. So put your fingers down and pull that, stretch that up nice and tight and pop some pins in. Now along the eye line you want to keep that nice ridge there, so if you pulled up on that you'd lose that eye line. So what you do is you just let that fabric relax down a little bit over the eye line. so that you've still got that nice indent there, because if you pulled up on it too tight then you're going to lose it. So just let that bit relax, put some pins in, and then you end up keeping that nice side profile shape. Otherwise you'll just pull all that out of shape. Okay, so you might be wondering why I've already got stitches along here in this fabric. Well, my video recording ran out after I'd sewn it, so I had to unpick the whole lot and start again. So to close the top bit, we're going to take one flap of it and lay it down and bring the other flap over, if I can actually hold her straight. So in this case I've laid the back flap down, and I'm bringing the front portion up and over, and I'm just going to pin that in place all the way along. Doesn't matter whether you go front over first or back over first, it doesn't make any difference whatsoever. So pin that in a line all the way along. And just have another check that that eye line is still looking good, that you've not pulled the tension on it too much. And then you're going to take your needle with some sewable thread and just stitch that together. I just do just a general slip stitch on that. And then with that little triangle flap, what you're going to do is you're just going to pinch it together and fold it over onto where you've just stitched, and put in a couple of pins to hold it in place. And sew down through there. Then when you get to that little dimple bit at the bottom of the triangle, you need to push your needle through the very bottom of it, up and under and out through the top, and pull on it hard, and that will help that to retract inwards and take away that sort of like sticky out dimple bit. Continue to do the same on the other side. And then sink your tail and snip the thread. And there she is, your finished little doll's head.